Gurubhyo Namaha.
Sri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Good afternoon. My name is Hari Kiran. I'm founder of Indic Academy, and I'm here with Dr. Nagaraj Paturi, who is the director of Inter Gurukula University Center at Indic Academy. Over the next 1 hour, we will be talking about Hindu folk response to epidemics in general and certain instances and certain specific deities, more specifically in the south of India. We are proposing to do a sort of a series of such conversations focused on folk traditions, Hindu folk traditions, and their culture. And this would be the first such conversation. Good afternoon, Dr. Nagaraj. How are you?
Yeah, in this corona conditions, we are trying to keep safe. And this conversation also can be focused on the response of the Hindu folk traditions to corona-like conditions.
Before that, can I just briefly tell our audience a bit of your background? And we'll start with Dr. Nagaraj Paturi, trained in Sanskrit and Advaita Vedanta by his polyglot, polymath, and spiritually accomplished late Sri Paturi Sitaramanjanil Garu. He seriously committed to the transmission of Vedic sciences to the present generation. He designed a very big number of courses of contemporary applications of Vedic sciences and has been successfully teaching them and getting them taught. Presently, he is director of Inter Gurukula University Center for Indic Knowledge Systems of Indic Academy. He was earlier at Flame School of Communication and of Flame School of Liberal Education. He was also a former visiting professor at University of Chicago. And in his PhD, he has developed an Indic model of myth criticism of literature. He brought out Vakyapadyam as a theoretical foundation of Ashtadhyayi. Today, we are seeking to discuss what would be the Hindu folk traditional response to epidemics in general. So, Dr. Nagaraj Garu, tell us how you got interested in this folk traditions. What has been your background specifically with respect to folk traditions?
Yeah, thank you, Hari Kiran Garu. I worked at the University of Hyderabad for Center for Folk Culture Studies for a very long time, for a few decades. And before getting into that academic teaching research job at the University of Hyderabad, I was into folklore research, folk cultural research, right from 1987, because I chose a particular myth interpretation, mythological story interpretation model, drawing from one Princeton University professor called Northrop Frye, from his book called Anatomy of Criticism, in which he creates a model of analysis of mythological stories and mythological literature, drawing from anthropology, psychoanalysis, philosophy, literary criticism, and a multidisciplinary model. So I thought I should particularly train myself in the folklore research, because I already have a very strong background on the Vedic side, on the Sanskrit side, on the literature side, on the classical side. But I should get the compensation of my training on the folklore side also, folk cultural side also. For that reason, I got into folklore research. I started with working on the shepherd cultures of Rayalaseema and Karnataka, where they have a priestly community called Gauravas, And then I started working on the transvestites who get dedicated to a folk goddess called Yallamma, who has another related form called Uligamma. And these that took me into LGBT research, folk side of LGBT research. And then this brought me into a huge world of village goddesses, mother goddesses, and entire folklore aspects. I then went into Tattvam's research, mystic yogis on the folk side, and whatnot. For around 35 years now, I have been into multiple aspects of folklore, particularly of the South. When my American teachers trained me in this field, they used to advise that to be able to understand a culture, it is always better to go there as an outsider so that you would be taking away all your prejudices as an insider. For that purpose, I started my research in Kerala because matrilineal family system there is outsider system for me. So I thought by doing that I can, and that took me to Keralite folklore, Teyyam culture there, all the Yakshini culture, the Rundarakshasa culture, all the Keralite folklore research I did. And then I have a great fascination and love for Tamil temple culture and all that. So I spent a lot of time on the Tamil Nadu side. As a Telugu person, I have worked on all the four regions of the Telugu land, the Kalinga, the eastern side, and the Krishna Godavari side, which is the central part, and the Rayalaseema side, which is the southern part. And particularly in Telangana, where I am currently staying for the last several decades, located at Hyderabad, I did the maximum part of my work on the Telangana side of Telugu folklore. And as a bilingual who has both Kannada and Telugu as mother tongues, I worked on Karnataka folklore also. And because the cults that I took up, for example, both Yellama cult and the shepherd cults that I took for research cover Maharashtra also. I had to do research on the Maharashtra side also. So this took me to the whole area, that region, and I had to cover folklore research. And this I used for my PhD work.
Okay.
This.
But before that, can you just broadly tell our viewers what you mean by folk as opposed to what? As opposed to Vedic. So what is the difference between these two terms?
Basically, the word folk is a global word. It is not always used in contrast to, say, Vedic. The contrasting to Vedic is only an Indian problem. But you have folklore everywhere in the world. And these folklore studies started in Europe, in modern Europe, when the romanticist come nationalist ideology was developing, there was a slogan called England lives in its villages, from where M.K. Gandhi borrows his India lives in its villages. So people started working on the peasant culture of England, and there were archives and museums that were created for the rural and village peasant cultures of England. And once they started working on that and they came to rule India through the university academics and by observing the British officials, Indians started getting interested in the topic of folklore. And because these British officials were working on the Indian folklore as a hobby, their wives, also colonial officials' wives, were taking this as a hobby and all that. Many Indian intellectuals started developing fascination for their own folklore, as part of their imitation of their colonial bosses. And then this word folklore came into
But these
popularity.
officials were urban situated officials, and as opposed to they were not from the villages. I mean, was it such a stark? Most of the intellectuals that we know always trace back at least one generation back to a village that they were living in. So, for them, would they consider themselves as folk, or I mean, how did
They
that
don't
happen?
consider themselves as folk. Actually, by those times, they in fact considered themselves to be completely different from what they considered folk. And the word folk had a pejorative connotation also. It had a looking down attitude also. They considered these peasants as less educated, uneducated, so to say, and there was a kind of romanticization of the looked down upon culture. So the words that are used are, these are innocent people, ignorant people, but we are broad-minded enough to take compassion for them, to take interest in them, and taking understanding them and all that. But nevertheless, they were modernist in their mindset. Nevertheless, they were evolutionist in their mindset. They were nevertheless Eurocentric in their mindset, Orientalist in their mindset. And they were looking at all these cultures as superstitious cultures, for example, because they were not scientific enough. So they were coming from the paradigm of science that was already emerging at that time. So they were looking at the belief systems of the folk as superstitious systems and all that. So the source of folklore research academically was from two sides. One is from the side of literature, where they were looking at folk literature as opposed to their mainstream elite literature. But there was the other stream coming from anthropology, and that cultural anthropology, particularly social anthropology, was in its beginnings was completely Eurocentric and Orientalist in its mindset. So for them, all this folklore, folk culture was a bunch of superstitions and innocent belief systems and all that.
So there were
And
two distinct cultures in the society. I mean, one was like or was there the overlapping kind of? How was it?
at that time, in the beginning, there was no awareness of intercultural interactions among different streams of culture. They, for example, they did not consider those days
Sorry,
urban.
which period are we talking about? Is this the colonial period?
19th century, early 19th century,
19. Okay.
19th century, and later part of 19th century. Gradually, up to early 20th century, the same attitudes were continuing. And the Indian intellectuals who were getting interested in folklore out of their imitation of their colonial bosses and the colonial rulers, also were imitating the same attitude, those borrowed attitudes that they themselves are urban people, they themselves are elite Indians, and they, like their bosses, they are also taking pity on, they are compassionate towards the rural people, and they started romanticizing the innocence of these folk people out, out of their attitude that was broad-mindedness. To romanticize, see, I am an educated person, in spite of being educated, I am loving the uneducated and all that. But gradually, in cultural anthropology, cultural relativism developed. The insider perspective, emic perspective, started dominating, and people started emphasizing this opposition to scientist attitude of looking down upon these cultures as superstitions and all that, and an approach of understanding these cultures empathetically from inside those cultures through methods like participant observation and getting completely involved in the community that you are studying and being part of that culture and all that developed. And coming back to India, there was already this linguistic families, language families, Dravidian family, Indo-European family already identified. So then if you're looking at folklore, you're looking at the Dravidian side. So if you're looking at the Vedic side, you're looking at the Indo-European side, so to say the Aryan side. That is the way they were looking at. So folklore research was considered to be the research on the Dravidian side, and the research on the Vedic side was looked at as the research on the Aryan side.
So
So
broadly, this was all a colony project, just in terms of the lens. Because if you're talking about 19th century,
yeah, it was part of the whole Eurocentric, Orientalist, colonialist political project. There was all this was happening already as part of that project. Some of them were consciously doing it, some of them were unconsciously getting trapped into the worldview that was already created. And most of the Indian intellectuals were taking pride in being progressive enough to be able to absorb the European perspective. And they started separating the Vedic and the folk. And they started saying, if you're talking of yajna and classical temple, you are talking about the Vedic, but you have to be progressive enough to be able to understand the folk side of the culture and all that. But
would you
interestingly,
have
what happened is uh, my observation on the Telugu folklore research side is that the early academic folklore researchers on the Telugu side were interestingly all from the Indic background. For example, Professor Biruduraju Ramaraju, who did his first PhD in folklore, was an Indic oriented person, and gradually his legacy, his students, and then his students of students, it all went into a kind of Indic approach only. So this attitude of India lives in its villages. So we have our roots in the folklore. We have to get our culture from its roots, grassroots. All this attitude from an Indic approach also was there. It was not always from a left liberal point of view that folklore research was happening here.
okay? What you largely outlined is during the colonial period. How was it during the medieval period, between these two cultures? How was the interaction?
Yeah, right from the ancient period, for that matter, through the medieval period, there was the Vedic and the folk cultures were interacting with each other, and there was a give and take between the two cultures, as it happens with any two cultures that come into interaction with each other, and all that. Though the colonial historians always wanted to project a conflict between these two cultures in the name of Aryan Dravidian conflict and all that. But the reality was that we have enough evidences to show that these two strands of culture, Vedic and folk, were having all kinds of interactions. So probably some kinds of conflict were also part of such interactions, but there was a huge amount of harmonious interaction, mutual influence kind of interaction, and all that also. And I borrow the word third culture from the contemporary cross-cultural studies, where they use the word third culture as a mediating culture that emerges between two interacting cultures uh, as a culture through which they can interact with each other. And what we call Puranic, Agamic, and classical temple culture emerged as a third culture for an interaction between the pure Vedic culture, which Swami Dayananda Saraswati in the 19th century wanted to reconstruct and revive out of the existing composite culture, syncretic culture in which the Vedic and folk were already merged into each other. And some people during contemporary times would like to view a pure folk culture without any influence of the Vedic at all. Both these do not exist in reality. There is no pure Vedic or pure folk culture that exists today, and it is impossible to reconstruct and revive such pure forms also. The failure of that experiment is shown in the failure of reconstructing and reviving the pure Vedic culture on the Arya Samaj side. And during the contemporary times also, the reconstructing and reviving the pure folk culture is also failing, because in reality the live and the live stream of the what is being labeled as Hindu culture today is this merger and combination of these two cultures into a single culture. Apart from, what is interesting is, whenever such mergers or amalgamations happen in other parts of the world, the contributing cultures completely disappear. Whereas in India, interestingly, what happened is the Vedic side, albeit the influence from folk side, and the folk side, albeit with its influence from the Vedic side, they exist. Apart from this third culture, which is the agamic temple culture that is being called as Hindu culture. So, what we are trying to talk today, the folk culture, folk traditions, they exist today as independent almost of Vedic culture, but you cannot see a pure folk culture without any influence of Vedic culture at all. That's not possible.
Okay.
And this situation has been in existence right from the ancient times. Uh, the more ancient or medieval period you go to find any folk culture without any Vedic influence, it is not possible. We are not able to get. Not only on the culture or tradition side, if you go to languages also, you cannot find a record of a regional language without Sanskrit influence.
Okay.
um, a pure regional language without Sanskrit influence in the recorded history does not exist. It, we can only imagine and reconstruct a pure stage of those regional languages without Sanskrit influence. Same is about folklore. Same is about folk traditions. We can only imagine a stage of history where the pure Vedic culture and the pure folk culture were existing away from each other without interaction, and all that is only an imagined past. In the recorded history, in the documented history, you would always see these influenced by each other, existing side by side, and interacting with this mediating culture that has emerged through an amalgamation and mixture of these two cultures, forming into what is being called as Hindu culture today.
Now, thank you. I mean, that was a very useful primer or background to get a sense of what we are calling as folk culture. In terms of folk religious traditions, and especially the traditions which respond to uh, crises, or which respond to nature's fury, or bountifulness. Just broadly, can you just outline those religious folk religious traditions?
Yeah, what is interesting as far as this village goddesses culture that we see as part of folk religious traditions in India is uh, that some of the names of these village goddesses themselves are the names of epidemics.
Oh,
Uh,
I see.
for example, the most famous South Indian village goddess name is Mari Amman. That word Mari itself is the word for epidemics. And in Sanskrit also, the word for epidemics is Mari, used in Artha Shastra and many other ancient sources. And the words like Mahamari are also used in Sanskrit. And that Mari Amman turns into Maremma in Telugu. And there are many other names like that. And if you see other such names, you have names like Sunkalamma. That Sunkalu is a symptom of kind of measles. And you have names like Dekalamma, Mutyalamma, Pochamma. Most of these names, the first part of the names, name when you remove Amma part of it, these are the descriptions of the symptoms of those seasonal epidemics, like measles and chickenpox and other things. So, but that is not the only variety of village goddesses. You have village goddesses which are named after sacred groves. For example, Mango's Amma, Mavul Amma,
Oh,
is it's a mango grove. You have Tallamma, toddy tree grove, and there is a goddess called Tallamma, Regulamma, berry trees. Groves are there, and berry tree groves Amma is there. And some of the village goddesses are named after the village itself. The village name plus Amma becomes the name of the village goddess. And you have the name of a village goddess after just one tree, banyan tree, for example, Marriman Amma, like that. So, though there are many other names also, but these names with names of epidemics become very interesting. Uh, and what happens is in the course of history, all these features of village goddesses get merged into each other. For example, if though the name of the goddess is the name of the village itself, she is also treated as the goddess of the epidemic.
okay.
They, though the name of the goddess is just the name of the grove, sacred grove, she is treated as the goddess of epidemic. And though the name of the goddess is the name of the epidemic, she is treated as the personification of the mother nature of the village ecosystem itself. So, to generalize, we can say that all village goddesses are personifications, deity divinizations, allegories of the village ecosystem, the neighborhood ecosystem. And the epidemic, when it occurs, or a natural calamity when it occurs, is always viewed as the angry side of Mother Nature, that village ecosystem. And they use folk medical vocabulary. As we all know, in India, in folk medical vocabulary, people use words like heat and cold. Uh, I developed heat, I developed cold, and all that. They apply this vocabulary to the person called the mother nature, called the village ecosystem, called the village goddess. And they say, now the epidemic has come because the mother goddess developed heat in her. So because
Ma,
the
in Telugu, from where I come from, I mean, వేడి చేసిందంటాం. So it is,
వేడి చేసింది. They say వేడి చేసింది.
yeah,
Heat built up in
yes,
your body,
yeah.
and చలువ చెయ్యాలి. వేడి చేస్తే వేడి తగ్గాలి అంటే, if heat is built up in the body, if it has to be alleviated, cold has to be created in the body. Though that cold is created through all kinds of healing solutions, one of the major things is food. Food is offered. Uh, a cooling food is offered. For example, onions are considered to be cooling material. Tamarind is considered to be cooling material. Curd rice is considered to be cooling material. Uh, Liquor which is made up of toddy is considered to be cooling material. In Maharashtra, government officially sells Neera, which comes from the juice of the toddy trees during summer for cooling down the bodies. And there is one liquor called kallu that is used in the
Yeah.
Telugu speaking areas, which is considered to be the cooling down folk medical material. And this liquor is offered to the goddess to cool her down. So what they do is outside, you might have observed the village goddess shrines are usually very small. The simplest structure for a village goddess temple is no temple at all. It is just a neem tree and a navel stone in front of it. Bodurai is the Telugu word they use. Bodurai can be translated into navel stone. It is called Bodurai because it was considered to be the central post, stone post, from which the village architecture was developed. All the village settlements, the housing structures of the village were built up, taking it as the center of the village. That is why it is called as Navel, Bodurai. And the neem tree, which provides shadow to this Kodurai, Naval Stone. These two together make the temple, that's all. It's just an open air temple. And if at all a small temple is built, it's a small shelf. Shrine is a small shrine, and inside the image of the goddess is an anthropomorphic image. There is no human form at all. It is just some shapeless stone or something like that. And gradually you see some naive sculpture, folk sculpture, village sculpture built for this mother goddess in that shrine. And what people do is they go settle down outside this shrine and cook food, this cooling food. They cook rice, for example. And when the rice is a little cooled down, they pour curd onto that and they prepare curd rice. And in the coastal part of Telugu speaking areas, they call it Pongallu. And in the Telangana part, they call it Bonam. And this food is in a battery of pots, one over the other. They are kept on the head and they are taken to the temple, and they are lowered down from the head, and the food is poured on to the goddess's image, mostly on the navel stone. It is poured onto the navel stone. In the coastal regions, they call it Kumbham Poyadam. In the Telangana region, they call it Rati Poyadam. And the whole process of offering this food to the goddess is done with a high amount of spiritual fervor. The material that is used for cooking, the cooking process, everything is considered to be mystic and supernatural in its power. And the person who holds it is supposed to hold it on the head in a very pure state, in a cleanly state. The person is supposed to have taken bath fully in a very clean state, and then the pot has to be kept on the head. And because that belief that there is a supernatural power in what I am offering to the supernatural is there, the person holding it on the head gets spiritually possessed. The
Oh,
person gets into trance. And while walking towards the temple, this person in trance even dances to the tunes of the drums and to the smell of the neem leaves that are taken along with it, and to the smell of the turmeric powder that is being taken along with it, and to the smell of the smokes that come from the dhoop sticks that come out of that. And the whole fervor is an occult kind of fervor, a supernatural ritualistic fervor. And through that, this food is taken and it is offered on the navel stone. And then they get this trance feeling that the goddess is now pulled up, the anger is gone. The heat in the body of the mother nature of the village ecosystem is now it is coming down. It came down because of my offering, because it is curd rice. And they even offer things like onions, tamarind juice, and liquor, the kallu liquor, all this. And they cut a chicken or a goat also. Actually, even today, the chicken blood is considered to be a cooling down agent in folk medical system, healing system. So even that is offered, and all kinds of what people call animal sacrifice or whatever. It is called in the Telugu area. The word they use is yatalu. They do the yatalu with chicken, goats, very rarely with buffaloes in front of the goddess. And it's a huge ritual. Actually, it takes time. If you have time, I can describe the whole ritual of this food offering, which goes on for 2 to 3 long days.
How is
Uh,
the naming done? How is the name? How, you're saying that some of these goddesses are now named after epidemics. So it would be a series of epidemics that happen, and then and these ceremonies happen, and then the goddess is named. I mean, what's that point in time when they call the goddess after the epidemic? How does that?
the Typically, my observation is that if a calamity occurs, like for example a fire accident in the village, or some earthquake, or inundation through floods, or something like that happens in a village, there are occurrences such as spirit possession. One of the persons of the village gets spirit possessed, and during that spirit possession, they give the reason for the calamity. And for example, if measles occurs, and the word for measles in that area is pochalu, in that area, the person who gets possessed says that Pochalamma, that is our Pochamma, has attacked our village because we did not keep her cooled down. We did not keep her satisfied. She has attacked our village. And she doesn't say she, because in a possessed condition, she speaks in the voice of the goddess itself.
What is?
So the goddess itself says, I'm Pochadamma, I'm Pochamma. I'm attacking your village because you did not keep me satisfied. And then that word comes out, the name Pocham comes out. So that becomes the name of the goddess. And they then install a shrine for her because already through their folk medical traditional knowledge, they know that neem tree is a cooling down tree. So they go to a neem tree and then establish a shrine under that. And they use all the neem leaves and other material from the neem tree and cool her down and offer what she asks for in the voice of the goddess. And usual offerings are already there is a formula for that. It happened in other villages, so it comes from that. So they because they know the formula, they do the rituals in the name of the formula, in the using the formula of the ritual, and the new shrine and the new name and the new goddess emerges.
Emerges. Fascinating. Fascinating. So just in terms of the research that you have done specifically in and around Telangana, what are the goddesses for epidemics that you have seen, noticed? Just can you just name a few?
As I already told you, the from the names of the goddesses, you can say Pochamma, Mutyalamma, Dekalamma, and all these names are names of epidemics only.
I
But
see.
ultimately, in reality, what happens is they every village goddess is everything. Every village goddess is the angry form of the nature in the form of epidemic, And also, she is the personification of the village ecosystem, and she is also the personification of the tree. She is also the allegory of the uh, village supernatural position, everything. So, though at a certain stage, the specific nature of that particular mother goddess is lost. She acquires all the features of all other mother goddesses also. Uh,
Understood.
so that name association. So to look at Pochamma as just an epidemic goddess gets lost in the course of history. Pochamma
Understood.
becomes village goddess as village goddess. Just she is the village goddess. She is the personification of the neighborhood ecosystem itself.
We have in Telangana we have this Bonalu festival.
Yes.
What's the genesis of that?
Yeah, I was fortunate to have conducted a research project for 15 years on the Bonalu of the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. Uh, During the course, we could know that the Bonalu is a pan South India tradition with different names in different parts of South India. But in Telangana, particularly in the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad, the Bonalu of the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad is a specific variety of that. And this specific variety of fair that happens in the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad has a history starting from 1868. During 1868, there was a big plague in this area, and the narrative, the legend goes that during that plague, just opposite to the Secunderabad railway station, where the railway station stands today, there is a folk shrine of a folk male god called Mallanna. And that particular Mallanna temple is called Pinugula Mallanna, Mallanna of the corpses.
Oh,
Uh, the legend goes that he was called Mallanna of the corpses because the people who died in during the plague were in heaps. Their dead bodies were lying in heaps in front of the temple. And uh, at that place, one of the persons there got possessed, and that person, in the voice of the goddess, said that this plague has come because of the anger of the goddess, and you would all be better if you pacify her. And very close to this shrine of me, that is Malana is saying. Malana is saying to this very close to my shrine, there is my sister's shrine called Ujjaini Mahankali temple. Please go and pacify her by making Bonalu offerings to her. And people immediately got inspired, and in hundreds they went to the Ujjaini Mahankali temple, which is very close to that Malana shrine, which is now located. It is a very famous place there in the RP road of Secunderabad.
yes.
In the Ujjaini Mahankali temple, they made the offerings. Uh, Actually, that neem tree and the navel stone still are preserved inside the well-constructed Ujjaini Mahankali temple there. This happens all over India. The natural forms like trees and all that, which existed before the construction of the temple, are preserved after the construction of the temple also. That happens in the Ujjaini Mahankali temple also. So they offered to that navel stone, and then later came the statue of Ujjaini Mahankali. Later it was constructed, it was sculpted by very good sculptors from Rajasthan. In white marble it was built, and it was brought from Rajasthan and installed in that temple and all that. That's a later history. But in 1868, what happened is inscribed there, there is an inscription there near Secunderabad, near the Ujjaini Mahankali temple. An inscription still lies there, which describes this whole episode, all the developments there. And you have many other inscriptions in the twin cities of Hyderabad and Secunderabad. For example, at the Osmania Hospital campus, There is an Urdu inscription which describes this episode of plague and volunteers and gratitude expressed for the volunteers during the plague and all that. So, and if you talk to the participants during the Bonalu also, all the senior participants, elderly, old-aged participants, if you ask them why you are performing, usual, typical, repeated response is there was a Pilakku and Kattara. These are the Telangana words. Pilakku is the Telangana modification for plague, and Gattara is the Telangana modification for cholera. So they say that there was a Pilakku and Gattara, and we started appeasing the goddess because repeated Pilakku and Gattara were coming in our area, and that's how this Bonalu festival started. That is still there in their memory, and the whole formula of the ritual is a week-long formula. On the previous Saturday to the Bonalu, Ghatam happens, and on the day before the Saturday, next Saturday, the goddess is readied. On the Sunday, these food is offered, and on the Monday there is these tiffins, palaharala ballu, and on the night of the Sunday you have that. Poli challadam, the blood-soaked rice is sprinkled all around the neighborhood. That is why the word Telugu word polimera has come. Mera is border.
Sorry.
Uh, the
Oh,
mera where poli is sprinkled is called polimera of the neighborhood. So all the and there is a particular community among the Dalits called Baindla. They are the ritual specialists for offering animal sacrifices, for conducting this poli during the night and all that.
so
So
does that happen even now? Animal sacrifice?
yes, yes.
Oh,
Though officially there is a law against animal sacrifice, in reality, animal sacrifice takes place.
but in terms of the smooth, this is probably one example of both Vedic and folk culture coming together and unifying into one single thing. I mean, essentially, it started off as a folk response to an epidemic, and then it became a Mahankali temple, and then you have these Rajasthani marble and all that. So effectively, then of course, Purohits, the evil Brahmins also came into the picture, and so it's just a fascinating thing of both cultures seamlessly mixing together.
Yes, that's a very interesting development. What happens is we can call classicalization of a folk temple, and during the
And there's no pushback. There's no pushback, right? I mean, is there a
absolutely,
so
absolutely.
what people talk about? There's no that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, it's just a seamless integration of two cultures into something common.
Exactly. What happens is, actually, in my interviews during my field work, in a very provocative fashion, I used to ask the folk communities, non-Brahminical folk communities, which participate in these folk rituals, typically, and ask them, why do you involve these Brahmins into these temples? Why do you bring them? Because they don't belong to you. They are not part of your tradition. And most of the responses were, why are you so jealous of our temple? Why are you thinking that our temple should not develop to the extent of a Brahmin coming and offering his worship?
Offer.
He comes and does the puja in a more elaborate fashion, in a methodical fashion, in the way it has to be done. He knows the method, and he's so kind to come to this place and offer all this. Why are you unnecessarily bringing this conflict? Was the response to me. Uh, and and on that side also, on the temple priest side also, if I ask the priest why you are coming to this place, this is not part of the Vedic tradition and all that. Usually, the priest's response is, who said that it is not part of the Vedic tradition? The same goddess is called Devi, and we have a whole Devi Bhagavatam, and all these epidemic responses, all these things are described in detail in Devi Bhagavatam. And I do Devi worship at my house. I know all the Devi mantras. I know that she is in the local form, in a very native form, in a folk form in this temple. My only hesitation in not coming to this temple earlier was that there is an animal sacrifice performed here, which I cannot bear. But when the participants of the temple promised to me that they would push the animal sacrifice place away from the actual shrine a little farther, and they do not perform it in front of my eyes, I said it's okay. I'm
Okay.
okay with your animal sacrifice. You doing animal sacrifice, you being a non-vegetarian, you being taking the prasadam from the animal sacrifice is not a problem for me. It's only my personal taste. It's only my personal attitude that I'm not able to bear the look of an animal being cut in front of me and all that. So you can do it somewhere else and come here and do the remaining part of the ritual here and all that. That's not a problem for me. So
What
this
is
is,
the genesis? Sorry,
yeah.
just I'm curious about, because after Telangana was formed, we had a very big revival of Batukama festival, and part of the Dasara celebrations. That whole thing is just a fantastic revival that has happened in the last 10 years. But the very name Batukama, what's the genesis of that? I mean, right now it's celebrated in as a celebration of bountiness probably, but it sounds to me that the genesis could be something from a epidemic also. Would
Thank you
that be
very
a
much
correct?
for bringing this up. I wanted to talk about this. The epidemic aspect of the goddess is one side of the coin, and exactly the opposite side of the coin of the mother goddess is the fertility side. Batukama is a fertility goddess.
Fertility.
The very name Batuku is life. So Batukama is a fertility goddess. The legend goes that she was the uh, highly beloved, looked after well sister of brothers, and she was harassed by her sisters-in-law, and she dies, and then the brothers identify that she was living in the form of a flower tree, and she talks through those flowers to her brothers and all that. So these narratives actually inherently they encapsulate in them the idea of flowers being the goddess.
Got
So
it.
she is the form of flowers, and uh, the Batukama installations that you see during the Batukama festival are all heaps of flowers.
Flowers.
The towers made up of flowers there. And as you can understand, flower is the fertility portion of a tree. And there is an identification between human woman and flower. That is why typically these festivals are women festivals. And if you see the Batukama dance, it is in the form of a circular dance. And if you watch the dance from a distance and a wide angle camera, if you apply, you can see that there is a design of a flower closing and opening during the dance. So the dance configuration itself is in the form of a flower, and the feminine movements in the dance, and everything is feminine there. It's a typical uh, uh, feminine festival celebrating the fertility ability, the potential for fertility, or the power of fertility, which has been looked at as a supernatural power possessed by the earth, by the trees in the form of flowers, by women among humans, and all that. So that fertility, there are worldwide cultures of fertility. Batukama is one of them, and you have Gobemma festival there, and Gorbhi festival of Gujarat is also the fertility festival there. The Gorbhi dance is a cognate dance of this Batukama dance and all that. So the fertility side is the just the opposite side. So the mother nature, when she is happy, when she is pleased, gives you crops, gives you prosperity, gives you wealth. She is Lakshmi. Batukama is also called as Lakshmi. In the songs of Batukama, you find expressions such as Sri Lakshmini Mahimalu Gauramma Chitramaito Chunamma. All such lines are found as part of this Batukama songs. She is Sri Lakshmi, Gauramma also. So she is a prosperity giver. It's a celebration of crop prosperity. Batukama festival comes as part of one of the crop seasons of Telangana.
But now
And
it's celebrated as a part of Dasara, right? One of the days.
no, it's just a coincidence that Dasara festival comes at that time.
Okay.
Uh, but there is no genetic connection between Dasara festival and Batkama festival. The coincidence of calendar for Batukama and Dasara festival is just a coincidence.
I see.
The Dasara calendar is a Sharan Navaratri calendar. What we call Dasara is in fact two different festivals falling one after the other. Sharan Navaratri is the first 9 days. The Dasara festival is the Vijayadashmi festival, but they are falling one after the other, so it looks as though it's a 10-day festival. But this festival, Batukama festival, ends before that festival. So it almost coincides with Dasara, but it has no link with Dasara.
Okay. So the question is that now, so we will see an emergence of Covidamma.
Yeah,
I think that's the question. That will
yeah, that's a
Telangana or
great
will Telugu
possibility.
state? Sorry.
What they are going to call it, COVID or Corona or on TV,
Coronatalli is one
Corona
option.
Talli, Corona Amma,
Covidamma is one option.
Covidamma, or what they call, most of these English words, they change their form when they go into the rural vocabulary. A minister on the TV screen was asking the villagers, why are you taking all these cares? Why these masks and all that? Just to tease them. And the response from them was, sir, we are told that some karna has happened. So their modification of the word was karna. Uh,
Yeah.
so probably if that stands, they might call her Karnamma or any other name. We have to wait and see what linguistic form it is going to take. But it can certainly be expected that today the whole rural folk, particularly of South India, is looking at what is happening here in the form of pandemic. They don't probably know that it's a pandemic. For them, it's an epidemic like any other epidemic that affected their villages in the past. So their view uh, definitely is that it is again nature's anger.
Nature.
We have done something wrong to the nature. She is angry with that, and she is expressing her anger in the form of this pandemic. And coincidentally, all the environmentalists are also looking at this pandemic as nature's anger.
Anger.
Uh, they are also looking at this as a reaction of nature to all the anti-environmentalist activities that we conducted. And the pro-nature changes that are taking place today, the rivers getting cleaned, more birds coming in, and trees blossoming, and many other pro-nature developments that we are able to see today, environmentalists are saying, see, this is why nature has done that. She wanted a break. She, she just wanted to relax and come back. That is why she did this. So this urban educated environmentalist understanding, we can see that in a very intuitive, rural romantic, nature worshipping, nature enjoying way. In the rural people, it always
Rural.
existed for millennia. It existed, and their nature loving attitude, nature friendly attitude, was not in such a discursive, logical, scientific, theoretical way, but in a very intuitive,
Intu-
emotional form. The same attitude existed in them, and that is what has been articulated in the form of providing a shrine to her, Mother Nature, to the village ecosystem, and talking to her. I get amazed when I go to my fieldworks. The amount of difference between our logical, scientific mind and the village mindset. Once, what happened is during my fieldworks, usually in our fieldworks, we pretend innocence so that we get more information from our informants. To a Decali person who belongs to a Dalit subcaste, who is a priestly, Dalit priestly community which offers worship at these shrines, he was taking me to the temple, and I was saying, she showed me a neem tree, and he said, "This is Pochamma." And he showed the navel stone and said, he is the brother. Navel stone, he is the brother of she, the Pochamma tree. Then I said, oh, you want to say that Pochamma, the woman, is sitting on the tree, and the male whom you are calling navel stone is sitting on the navel stone? He got very angry with me, and he started shouting at me. He said, "You educated people are nonsensical. You never understand." He said, "You educated people, I don't know what you mean. I was telling you that neem tree is Pocham. She is Pocham. And you say that she's sitting on that." Then I said, no, 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 okay, okay, I'm sorry. And so you say that you are looking at the neem tree as Pochamma. Then he said, what is this as? She is. She is Pochamma. And then I said, I'm not able to see. Then he said, that is your problem. That is the problem you are getting because of your so-called education. Why did you get educated? That is why you are not able to see her. That is the point. That they are able to see it even now. They're able to interact with her. They are getting possessed. They just get into the emotional outburst in the form of that spirit position. They speak in voices. For them, it all exists there. The mother nature exists there. The village ecosystem exists there. They talk to her. uh, the way they talk to her, we are not able to see. We try to bring Freud, we try to bring everything, psychopathology. That's a trance, that's a schizophrenia, that's a multiple personality, that is a split personality, he is going into some other personality at that time. And all kinds of educated nonsense we try to bring into that. But in reality, what's happening is they are living the nature. They are
yeah.
living the mother nature. What the contemporary urban educated environmentalist is saying in a logical form is happening in an emotional form in them, and they are interacting with her. So now, for example, during measles or chicken pox, when a child is having that problem, They quarantine the child.
Correct.
And during the quarantine stage, they say the child is with the mother. The mother is talking to her, talking to the child. And they let us give them privacy. See, quarantine is a privacy between mother corona and the quarantine patient, corona patient. Do we look at it that way? We take pity on the corona patient and say that, oh, he's suffering, we have quarantined him because of that. But the folk attitude towards that is, he is under the care of mother corona. She is just angry, but okay, it will all be all right after some time. They have a positive attitude. But if something goes wrong, also they say she liked him and she took him away.
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything is taken in a very positive attitude. So for them, epidemics and pandemics and all that, they don't fight with them. We in all our educated conversations, we are using the word battle, war, fighting. We will win. There will be victory, all kinds of things. But for them, it is just her anger. All mothers get angry. She is also angry now. Mothers will get cooled down. After all, they are mothers. In Sanskrit, they say, Kuputro jayeta vachidapi kumata na bhavati. There can be a bad son, but there can never be a bad mother. Though this is articulated in Sanskrit like this, they say it in their own local languages and they say there can never be a bad mother. She's Corona mother has come. She is angry with us. She'll be cooled down. Once she is cooled down, everything will be all right. She may be visiting us now and then in future also, but whenever she visits, let us cool her down and let us live with her. We are going to live with our mother, Corona. That's the way they look at her.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. That was a very fascinating insights into Hindu folk traditions, Hindu folk religious responses to epidemics and pandemics. It's very, very fascinating. Yeah, let us look for the Coronatalli or the Covidamma soon, and
Mother Corona.
Mother Corona.
Mother COVID.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you to the viewers. What we are looking at is we are planning to host a conference on folk traditions, folk culture, folklore soon, whenever we can do that. But as a prelude to that conference, we will be having conversations on folk traditions. We will be also inviting speakers to have conversations with Dr. Nagaraj. Probably in about 10 days' time, we will be having a conversation on folk songs in and around Telangana. We will be having Tatwalu and folk songs. So we'll be having a conversation there. So do look forward to please continue to engage with us on this very interesting topic on folk traditions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nagaraj.